All right, welcome back here, Jordy Culotta Show. Running a little late. Our apologies to our next guest, Brody Miller, having him sit here for a couple of minutes. But some LSU football storylines to get to here on this Wednesday, first day back from Mardi Gras. Happy Carnival to everybody. Hopefully everybody's back safe and sound into their workplace, into their home, wherever you are, getting going here after Mardi Gras on this Ash Wednesday. We check in with Brody Miller from The Athletic. Brody, good morning. How are you?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me as always.
Absolutely, buddy. So some stories around LSU over the last 48 hours we want to touch on. Obviously, Malik Nabers down in New Orleans picked up on a gun charge, released from NOPD yesterday morning. What do you expect the fallout to be from this?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because Kelly is simultaneously such a big part of kind of what he's doing is discipline and responsibility and, punishments for things like this. And I think there will be punishment. But it's also, as you know, sometimes a tricky thing when these off-field things happen this early in the offseason where, hey, maybe it's more of an in-house punishment. Maybe it's more of something over the next 6 months to handle that. And maybe there will be, a half or a quarter of some game. But quite often you see these things kind of get handled in-house when they're this early. Or maybe it's the, Florida State's the opener. Hey, maybe it's the second game of the year you see them miss a half. That happens. We've seen that a few times. But yeah, I'm sure there will be plenty of punishment with Malik Nabers. But at the same time, I don't think you're going to see Malik Nabers, I would be surprised if I saw him say face jail time or anything like that.
Amen. I'm with you. I don't think that he misses a down, especially against Florida State. I think he runs a lot of stadiums. I think he'll have a price to pay somewhere. We just will not see it. And then the other story over the last 24 hours is that Brian Polian has been repositioned inside of the program. What do you expect next for special teams and recruiting?
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating in terms of where they go for special teams coordinator because, one, the fact that they are at the point that they felt this was necessary is showing how seriously they take this, how much they realize that is an integral part of college football that needs to be changed, that needs to be improved. And it's LSU. First off, Brian Polian was making, I believe, $675,000 a year, which he will continue, but that is showing that there's a proven market for how much LSU is willing to spend on special teams, I guess is the best way to put that. Obviously, he had other roles recruiting as well. But I'm curious to see, how national, how big LSU goes with special teams, and it's too early for me to have a bunch of names ready for you of who I think they're going to hire. But shoot, it's like, would they even throw a bag down at Pete Lembo at South Carolina, who is generally considered one of the best special teams coaches of the last 10, 20 years and has done wonderful things in South Carolina, which it's LSU. The country's kind of your oyster in terms of who you're going to go for, but it's also hard to pry a guy in late February, March. But yes, I think LSU is going to go big on that. In terms of recruiting, yeah, I think Brian Polian is going to, move into that kind of general manager-esque role. But, it's going to be a little more NIL, a little more transfer portal, a little more overall roster management kind of operations stuff. And by the way, that's a role that, from what I was told, Kelly talked with him about when he was first coming down here. And Polian, I think, really wanted to be on the field, really wanted to be in a coaching job. And now it's kind of come to this. But this is something that we've seen over the years, right? That college football is headed this way. Yeah. You can't just have a good personnel guy up to that role. I think we're going to see more of a Polian, a guy who actually, is an on-field coach, has major, background, become a general manager because it's too important now. That's half the job. And then I do think on top of that, we do see, Frank Wilson, some other guys maybe take on a slightly, even though Polian will still be crucial in it, maybe take on a larger high school role in recruiting as well. So I think it's going to be a really interesting year at LSU. For sure.
Yeah, you'll probably be managing a cap as a general manager in college football in a couple of years.
Yes. You are talking to the collective guys, I'm sure, constantly figuring out all the situations with that. Yeah, you are, the scholarship numbers, everything's kind of changing constantly. You probably have to be the rules expert in so many ways of just how everything's happening. But yeah, it is a different time. It is no longer like, hey, let's find a guy in the portal. No, it is now you need to be thinking about what your resources are, what you have, what you need. You need to be working on guys for years. That's the other thing of why this role, I think, is relevant, because it's not just it, as we all know, and we've seen with an Aaron Anderson, for example, it's not over at signing day because you need to be kind of through third parties, whatever. Yeah. You need to be having good relationships with guys for years for when the day comes that they hit the portal. You need to be able to talk to them and have a good relationship. So, yeah, this is as much as, Brian Polian is obviously being moved off the special teams coordinator job, and that's real, they're moving him off that for a reason, he is still going to have an essential job at LSU. So it is just kind of fascinating times.
From a recruiting standpoint, you mentioned both Frank Wilson and some of the other staff members. Cortez Hankton's name pops to mind just because of how local he is and the relationships that they have established. Do you think that that's more of a title that they move on in-house, or is that something that they might even stay away from?
That's a good question. I don't have a great answer to that, but I wouldn't be surprised if, with Polian moving the general manager, maybe Frank Wilson does get that. Now, I will say, I think we've all learned so much of titles is about salary.
Absolutely.
And Frank Wilson, for example, already has the associate head coach title, and that gives him a nice little bump. So it's and Cortez Hankton already has pass game coordinator, so that gives him a certain bump. But maybe we don't see a literal recruiting coordinator to another coach, or maybe we do. Maybe a Joe Sloan gets that and he gets a bump. I have no idea. But to your point, it is sometimes semantics. It is. Yeah. Sometimes it isn't. But I think, Tommy Robinson's an example of a guy where maybe it's a little semantics. And I think you will see a lot of those guys take on bigger roles. I do think your Frank Wilsons, your Sloans, even your Canes nationally. Jamar Cain's so important nationally in recruiting. There's so many other guys like that. I do think you'll see a little more freedom maybe to a Frank Wilson that he didn't have that first year in Baton Rouge.
All speculation here on this next question, just kind of judging off of some of the moves here. Yes. But Brian Kelly in the SEC, do you think he realized, whoa, the margin for error down here is? Yep. I mean, you got to be almost airtight on everything.
I think there's so much validity to that. I think first off, we all are, but the biggest believer that special teams is the difference. It is the margin. It is the thing that, I am the 2018 LSU, for example, but so many LSU years under Greg McMahon, they were always top 10, top 15 in special teams, SP plus and all that. And 2018 is always my example because 2018 wasn't exactly an amazing team, but they won every game in the margins. They won so many games. And even if it wasn't just, Cole Tracy making the big kick, it was they won because of those few extra yards and field position. And special teams is everything. And Kelly is such a do self-inventory, look at the whole picture, constantly find ways to evaluate and get better. And I'm sure he did look at this and say, hey, I think they finished 92nd in special teams SP plus this year. Wow. That is unacceptable. That is the difference it literally is the difference in the Florida State game. And you do have to kind of take a step back and make sure that that's a strength because I use South Carolina as an example. South Carolina this year is fascinating because they were 40, I'm putting up 40th in offense, 40th in defense. They weren't some amazing football team, but they were the best special teams in the country. And that is what led to South Carolina having this breakout year with Beamer because they were so good in the details. So I think that is huge. Absolutely.
Going into spring here, still spring dates have not been announced, but anticipate them to be here in the next couple of weeks of when they get onto the field. We've talked a little bit about the defensive line, and you just mentioned Jamar Cain and his presence of what he brings both nationally recruiting and development on the field. What a lot of the names that are going to be in his positions, key positions, are new ones. What are you looking at from that group here a couple of weeks out from seeing them on the field?
Yeah, I'm so intrigued by this group, and obviously some of it's going to be tough because, I don't think we're going to see Mason Smith. We're not going to in spring a ton, or maybe a little. Or you're not going to see. I don't think we're going to see a lot of Mekhi Wingo either. But at the same time, it's such a fascinating group because you have a bunch of pieces you really like. But Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo technically play the same position, and I know that's semantics. You move things around, but it's do you want to neutralize how good they are by moving them inside a bit more? I don't know if you want to do that. And they're going to figure it out. We're going to see some two-man fronts with them both lined up at the guard, all that. But my point of that is, what does Jamar Cain, what does, Matt House come up with to kind of get the best guys in the field? Because, when you want to go with a true nose tackle, nose guard, Guillory's your guy, and he's a really good one. Jordan Jefferson's really good, too. That's a really good group there. But, how often do they not even use that? But obviously, part of your question, I'm sure, is what happens at that strong side defensive end spot that Ollie Gay's leaving open. Mm-hmm. And that's another one where you add a Paris Shand, who I think we both like and has high upside. But Savion Jones is developing in such a way that I think he's got to be in the front runner for that job if a Smith and a Wingo don't move over there. But I think, Savion Jones is doing such good things, looked so good in that bowl game, but looked all year. Kelly looked good all year. Kelly raved about him. And we haven't even mentioned Quincy Wiggins, who is the freak. He is the guy who has a chance to be one of the best players at LSU, but it's just kind of getting that clay together as a redshirt freshman. What's his position? I think most likely he's a DN. That's probably what he is. I don't think he ends up being an edge rusher, but still, but is he quite ready? They have a lot of fun pieces because Shand also might step up and be that guy. You have a lot of really good pieces there, but you have no idea what it looks like yet. You have no idea who goes what spot, and that's going to make that really interesting this spring, and probably even more so really interesting this summer.
Any feedback from any of the sources that you talked to inside of the program of the impact Omar Speights has had on the defense early on? I've had a lot of people, and not a lot, but I've heard people tell me that his leadership really has popped early on.
Yeah, that's been, and like it's almost like we're a broken record. Like that is. There's so much I feel like I overhype about Brian Kelly era, but that part's real. Like they are so focused on bringing in the right guys, the right leadership. And yeah, I have heard that Omar Speights. I mean, that's a room where you like the talent at linebacker, but you're probably missing that leader. You're probably missing that guy who calls the shots. Mike Jones was a leader, but maybe he wasn't like the guy everyone's like, I defer to you because, he wasn't a starter, all that stuff. Yeah. Omar Speights, I think, very much has that. He has a professionalism to him as a 3-4 year player at Oregon State. And I think that's key. And also just football-wise, what that does to that room to give them more options, to give them more pieces to move around. I keep talking about how I'm so intrigued, and I don't really know X's and O's of football. I'll never pretend I'm really an expert, but Speights seems like such a mobile, float around linebacker, kind of like Perkins in a way. And I'm just interested to see how much you can use those two as kind of to never allow offenses to diagnose who's who, because both those guys can come off the edge. Both those guys can drop into coverage whenever you want. And that's really exciting. But yes, I've heard those same things. I think Speights is a key addition. And he's the difference from this being a preseason, number 6 to hey, this team really should compete for the playoff if things go right.
Another name that keeps popping on people that I speak with in the program is Emery Jones. Jones seems to have really, and I don't think this is surprising to anyone, but it's just happening in front of their eyes where you're seeing this, first-round NFL draft pick just develop, and not only on the field, in the facility with leadership and maturity. Have you heard any other names? And if you have heard anything on Jones, have you heard similar things?
Yeah, Emery Jones, I mean, it's I don't want to get ahead of myself. He's one of the best kids. We've all talked to high schoolers all the time. We all talk. He is just clearly an exceptional leader. He thinks things through like an adult. I mean, we all read the stories, and I've read the stories about how he basically helped take, his mom always calls him her caretaker and all that, is her guardian. And that's who he is. And I think that's what now, with a year of being a starter, a year of being a guy, he is going to really elevate to being that kind of leader at LSU, because he is that kind of character. He is that kind of guy. I mean, he's in that Mason Smith, Mike Jones kind of group of guys they just trust and lean on. The staff loves. And the thing with Jones, to your point, he is a stud also. He, in a lot of ways, has almost more of a development frame than even a Will Campbell, even though Will Campbell is the pinnacle. He's the dude. But Jones has that long, just athletic body where you can probably put him guard, tackle, whatever you want. He can keep adding weight. He's going to be a star. So I think it's really exciting to see what he becomes. And I think that's a really good call that he is probably one of the biggest growth prospects of year 2 at LSU. I think that's totally about that.
I agree. For how good he was in year 1, and he was fantastic. He was
fantastic.
So I think that people cannot wait for the public to see how much better he is. Just the experience of what that gave him from a confidence standpoint. That Georgia game going up against those first round picks, I think is going to go a million miles for him. Just what it did for him.
And I'd love to see, I'm not getting ahead of myself because I think realistically the starting lineup's probably the 5 guys we saw last year with Dellinger sliding in for Bradford. But down the road, does Lance hurt and he's coming in later, but is he so good that he has to crack the lineup? Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe Emery Jones can move to guard. He's easily practiced there some, and he is the frame to do it. That might even be his more natural position. I could totally see that. Yeah. So I think that is such a big thing that's going to open up things for him and also probably help his stock even more to show he can do stuff like that. So I'm with you. Emery Jones is Quincy Wiggins is probably the number 1. I want to buy stock now and see what happens. But Emery Jones might be number 2.
Yeah, he's Apple. He feels like the most this thing is going to pay every day. It's going to pay. All right, last one. I'm going to get you out of here. And it's not football. You had a great write-up, I thought, on the baseball team. And the title of it was LSU has built a super team. Now what the Tigers just need is to win a national title. What did you learn about this team of personalities that has been put together very strategically by Jay Johnson? Yep. I think he knew what he was doing when he he sought out to put this group together. What do you expect from this group? What did you learn about them?
Yeah, I think Jay Johnson, I mean, when we were all writing our profiles when he first got hired, right, everything we learned about him was that he's the guy who loves the whiteboard, mapping things out in the offseason. That is how he's a recruiter through and through. But more than that, general manager, to our theme earlier, like, he thinks about building rosters. Yeah. He's such a good recruiter, going back to building those superpowers at San Diego with Chris Bryant. And I think this era might actually, he denies that he's excited for this. He denies that this is a great fit for him, all that. But he has to be careful. But this era feels perfect for him because he is so good at that, and he is so good at relationships, and he has a selling point. And I think what I learned from this was that first year with the portal, when they were able to bring in Jacob Berry, your Riley Coopers, all these guys, that was kind of his, like, they were the first ones really being aggressive with that in college baseball, but it was still just a small amount. It was really just patching holes. But he said, he's like, I think LSU got a head start for this year because Jay Johnson learned how that worked, how simple it can be at times, and how to kind of appeal to people and how you can sell it. So when this year came, where clearly it's become the Wild West, he capitalized and he thrived. I mean, bringing in Paul Skeens, Christian Little, Tommy White, just Thatcher Hurd, the names keep going, Bednar Poole. That is, I think no one else is doing that. He's angered a lot of college baseball coaches, but they wish they were doing that too. Yeah. And it's the NIL era, it's the transfer portal era, but I think LSU being the biggest brand, being the superpower, having a coach like that thinks like that, I think that is going to be, this is what LSU can be going forward. And yeah, to what this team can be, they have one of the best lineups in baseball. That's no secret. But now you have a pitching staff that I think the way he put it's really smart. LSU was great in the margins last year. They won so many close games. They did a good job, but they were out of a lot of games because their pitching staff wasn't great. And sometimes they would just be down 8-0, and there's nothing you can do about that. And he's like, now LSU will never be out. There's no games they should just be out of. And I think that's a really good way to put it, that now you have a staff that puts you in every series, every game. And there's no reason this team shouldn't be number one in the country. Absolutely.
Read his work over at The Athletic. Easy to keep up with him on Twitter at Brody A. Miller, and you can catch him here routinely. We always appreciate your time, man. Thank you, and hopefully you had a great Mardi Gras.
I did have a great Mardi Gras. Hope you did too.
Later,
Same,
buddy.
Brody. Same.
Later, man. All right, there he is, Brody Miller, checking in from New Orleans and from The Athletic. Great stuff. As we said, if you want to find his work, you can read it there at The Athletic and read it on Twitter at Brody.